Nick Fuentes is a bit of a king, even if his followers don't call him that and he doesn't think of himself that way. In some sense he is still a king. They at least, if he's like gonna go to a rally or something, they will follow him there. They will join him at some rally somewhere. Even when all of the, basically, when every institution on Earth has turned against him, like all the banks and shit, like he can't even have a bank account now, he can't have a YouTube channel. His followers are still there to keep him afloat in whatever way they can, through whatever means they can. They are still there for him, and he is still a leader figure to them. So even though he doesn't have a kingdom, he doesn't have territory that his people live on, they're all over the place, and he himself is all over the place. He's still, in a sense, a king. And so the epiphany I had was that can be anybody. As long as are you are some sort of leader figure, people follow you, and they have like genuine devotion to you. It is kind of an imposition. They are kind of imposing this responsibility on you. But if people look up to you like that in large numbers, you're kind of responsible for leading them because they look up to you. You should take the responsibility. You should rise to the occasion. But my overall point is you don't need land to be a king. It's really just, do people follow you? Will people do what you say? Anyone really who has followers where, like, if he says jump, they ask how high. They will listen to him to that extent. So you can be a king like that. So yeah, you don't need land to be a king. You don't need an official name for your kingdom even. It's just, it's you. You are the kingdom. And that's what we believe as monarchists anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
The king is the law. He is the kingdom. I was just thinking of, as I start to get people like that, I should start like treating them as if like we are a sort of kingdom. So I want to put some space aside on maybe the website or something, or maybe on my server. I want that to be like where my genuine followers gather. But I want this to start being a trend. I want I want to see these kinds of leaders popping up everywhere, like kings, and I want them to call themselves kings. Even if your following is only 5 people, whether it's 5 people or if it's like Nick Fuentes size, which is a couple thousand, I think, I'm assuming. No matter what it is, like, men need to start thinking of themselves as kings or followers of kings. Even though you're not bound to a land, you're not bound to the land that he lives on. But yeah, I want to start seeing that everywhere. Men who are either kings or followers of kings, no matter how big or small their following is. I want men to get into that mindset. And that might be a good way to encourage the mindset and maybe accelerate monarchy returning for real if men start thinking of things in this way, in this hierarchical way. Either you are the leader of your own people, your own followers, or you're one of the followers.
Yeah. Even if it's not you or any of us, for that matter, as I think I've said, and you've all pretty much agreed with me on when not this topic, but when the topic of monarchism not getting traction came up, it's not about so much which people we need to get this going, just as long as there is somebody to push this forward and people to back them.
Well, even if we don't have an elite of some kind backing us, like I said about Nick Fuentes, despite, he's on a no-fly list, he can't open a bank account, despite all of these attacks, you could basically call them attacks. The system trying to suffocate him to death, to remove him from the picture without just outright assassinating him. Despite that, his people take care of him. I don't know how. I don't know through what means they do it, but they send him money whenever he does a show. People will send him like $5 or $10 just to ask him a quick question. I've seen it. It happens all the time. But it's not just for the sake of asking him a question. It's not just for the sake of having him read something you wrote on his show. It's genuine support.
Unlike what,
In a way, he's taking care of them, and they take care of him. I mean, that's why that's why taxes exist in the first place. You are paying your leaders to lead.
yeah, yeah. I don't know what more I could add to all of that. Really, that's a good way of looking at it. And I like how you brought up when Nick Fuentes gets super chats and whatnot. It's not just people sending things to have it read, or just know that he said something they wrote. It's genuine support. Before you brought that up, I was just thinking on how common it is for content creators in general to be held up on pedestals for being entertainers. It was good that you brought that up, but it's definitely not something that should stop at people living apart and sending resources to each other over great distances. That is a unique benefit to living in the current time that we are with the technology that we have, that we can communicate and exchange help and resources across such distances with relative ease. But I don't think it could actually last all too long or well unless that was used to what you initially proposed in your Creating Monarchy Society's videos, where you do eventually gather up who are these people who would form these kingdoms to actually be in physical proximity to each other. Since the issue you run into with it solely communicating digitally, one, anonymity, which isn't of itself an issue. I'm all for being anonymous on the internet, given the avatar I hide behind. But that is nevertheless a barrier to creating genuine connection with someone who you would want to call your people. And it's something we're seeing all across the world as people become more and more reliant on our technology. We're drawn away from interacting with each other just out in the physical world. Yeah, that's definitely a good start, just in the sense that yeah, we don't necessarily have to have a land or some physical presence to be right away. We can absolutely start, and of course many people can do this. Just start, digital, like we're already doing. We communicate, via the internet and through other means. But of course, that should just be it should be a step to the goal of bringing monarchy back.
Maybe like we should come up with a name for people like Fuentes who just simply receive the support and don't try to build any infrastructure with it. And the people who actually try to build physical kingdoms with it, those we should call kings. But I still want the attitude to be the same across the board.
No, that's a good idea. Because that's definitely a good way of looking at it.
The epiphany that I had, it's pretty simple. It is something I basically already knew anyway. It's different when you've actually lived on a land for generations. I understand that. But in this current day and age, the kingdom is the king. That's where it is. It's wherever he is. That is your kingdom, the one you follow.
Well, throughout history, when kingdoms would come under attack, why would there be so much emphasis on protecting their king? Well, of course, the civilians, the citizens, the plebeians, the people are, they're valuable to the king, and so is the land, and the army and the military. But why there has always been such an emphasis? Heck, even in our democracies, there's still an emphasis on protecting whoever the supposed leader is, like how United States presidents have their Secret Service, is because traditionally speaking, it's been proven that when a leader falls, the people and the elites as well, if assuming they're not fighting amongst each other in whichever scenario, they don't know what to fall back on, who to go to for directions and for answers, and that's where you get collapse. It's also why royalty was always held to a higher station. It is because their role, even if they weren't necessarily getting their hands dirty the way a soldier would or a farmer would, different ways of getting hands dirty, but still, it's them who hold the kingdom together. It is their direction and their oversight which helps who oversees all these other pieces meshing together to create a functioning machine.
And additionally, I don't know how often this happened. I can't think of a single example, but let's say throughout history, at some point in history, or several points, it did happen. Let's say the land is taken, but the king is still alive. The kingdom's not truly gone because they still have their king. So even when you have land, even when you are a kingdom in both blood and land and leadership, as long as the king is still there, you still haven't truly lost. Whereas you say you win the war, but the king and all of his heirs died. Well, you may as well have lost your land too. You guys can like pick up the pieces, sure, but it's just going to be further mess and a kind of brokenness too, because that wasn't supposed to happen. You actually have more cohesion as a group when you still have your leader. In almost any situation, really. Like imagine Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, still has a leadership role in the company. Like if he's suddenly gone, like, well, okay, what is Amazon without him? Will it survive? Probably, but it's going to be a heavy blow to Amazon if he just suddenly croaked. Or take, I don't know if you're very familiar with the business world, but Warren Buffett, he's like the most famous investor alive. He got rich by just investing throughout his entire life and spending very little of his money and just always investing it across decades. He didn't become a billionaire until his mid 50s, but he started investing when he was still a kid. But he owns a shitload of companies now because most of the investments paid off in a big way, and he's one of the richest people alive. Like when people invest in his company, the company that he uses to invest in other companies, which is called Berkshire Hathaway. What's going to happen to Berkshire Hathaway when Warren Buffett's gone? I can guarantee you their stock is going to tank for at least a little bit. He is the company. He is the face of the company. People invest in him, not so much the company. This is just the way humans operate. So no matter what the situation is, whether you belong to a physical land or not, a people basically still are their leader. I think this is a good mindset to have going forward and possibly helping people accept monarchy. That's a good way to get it spreading and keep it small enough to enter people's psyche and grow.
Well, whenever a leader's been taken down, what's followed has always been either power struggle, outright collapse, if not both. And really, when I just thought of another analogy, a really simple one, it's really like the game of chess. You know, you don't really want to lose any of your pieces if you want to have the best chance of victory. But sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece, and sometimes you will lose one as you play the game. But as long as you have your king, you're still in the game.
Yeah.
It's when you put in checkmate that you've lost.
Yeah, even just the king.
Until you decide to play. Yeah. And then if you decide to play again, you're not even, yes, it's still the game of chess, and you still have the physical pieces there. You're not playing the same game. You're playing chess, but you're not playing the same game of chess anymore. It's a new one.
Yeah, still revolves around the king, no matter what.
Yeah, and when one falls, a leader there always becomes a new leader somewhere. It's a matter of through what means and who becomes a leader when the old one goes away for any reason.
Or to use another fictional example, I'm sure you've seen The Lion King. Like what happened to Pride Rock when Mufasa died? Yeah, everyone was still there. The physical rock was still there. It was physically all still there, but no one was ever the same. Because, like, kings
Well,
are not just the guy in charge, like they are also the spiritual center. That's why I mostly believe at this point, for the most part, I believe that kings should also be the heads of their own nation's church. Like the Anglicans, for example, like that's Church of England. Like every nation should be its own Church of England, in my opinion. In my opinion. I'm not 100% set on that, but it goes back to spiritual health of a people as well, not just political.
you brought up the Lion King as an example. Well, after Mufasa died, they did have a king. Scar became that king. Before you made your video about King James and the American Revolution,
George, but
I had
yeah.
come to the conclusion. Sorry, George. I had already come to the conclusion when I had decided to become a monarchist last year, and that conclusion was we didn't rebel supposedly against the king out of any overreach, not any royal overreach, but rather uh, royal neglect. It was neglect from the crown and the king that the colonists faced, not overreach as far as tyranny goes. That was the conclusion I came to, and that is demonstrated again when you brought up the Lion King as an example. They still had a king, but Scar was not that uh, center that Mufasa was. And as we see in the movie, the kingdom suffered for it.
I don't know if this was entirely your point, but at least you made me realize one of the big reasons, maybe the biggest reason that it was even possible for the colonists to have this full-fledged rebellion against the homeland is because the king was only a figurehead. They weren't truly united, were they, with the homeland, with England proper.
Nope.
Even though they were just mere colonies, they weren't supposed to be nations outright. They're just colonies of a nation. George and his immediate predecessors, he was not the center of their leadership. He was not the center of anything, really. He's just a face. And how do you stay united behind just a face? The only thing a face is good for is passing blame or maintaining some cultural traditions or habits. But that's it.
Yeah. You see, and
He was
I've
he
never
was
had a
not
reason to say.
yeah, he was
Sorry.
not their people is what I'm trying to articulate here. He was not their people.
Yeah.
Parliament was, which is nonsense. Groups cannot represent groups. It's one of my issues with democracy. Groups cannot represent
Yeah.
groups. Only a
See,
leader represents the people he leads.
you see, and this is actually why, and I haven't had any reason to bring it up until now. This is why I actually don't consider the American Revolution to be a mistake or a bad thing. Because they were, as I viewed it when I became a monarchist, neglected by their king, they were left to determine their own destiny from their own. However, that may have been the case, as you would later point out when you made that video, when whether or not the British were justified in how they handled the situation, vice versa, because they didn't have their king to depend on, they felt that they were or at least the revolutionaries, the founders, they felt that they would be better off because they couldn't get, what is no taxation without representation. It's in Parliament. If they can't have a voice in Parliament, and they can't count on their king, who is a face, a figurehead, doesn't actually have any, if much, real power, who can they depend on for their plight? In the colonies, an entire ocean away. What I do think was a mistake is that, as much as I'm not for Hamilton's idea of the monarch still being called the president and being elected, after death, they would still have reign for the whole lives. I do think they should have more modeled what the English monarchy at the time should have been. So, however flawed of a, so for example, however flawed of a man George Washington was, I absolutely believe he should have been the king of America. No
Oh yeah.
question.
Oh yeah, me too. He was
Because
offered it.
even with all of his, yeah, he was. Because even with all, you know what's cool about forming a new nation and there being a king who's maybe not the best suited, or at least may not be the best person for the job, you still have, based on however many children he has that creates his royal lineage, any one of them can be better, and of course, we also understand, or worse than the one that came before. So there's at least still a chance that, however rough that could have turned out if America had just been a monarchy from the get go, there was always room for improvement. And then, of course, if it never did, well, it would have just, well, I mean, we've seen throughout both history and scripture what happens when nations don't have good kings, which we've already established can be attributed to whether or not the people themselves, as well as the elite and rulers, are living in righteousness or wickedness.
That phrase alone, no taxation without representation, that phrase alone proves when I tell people that we fought Parliament, not George. And it proves it
Yep.
because if the king was truly a king, you don't need representation. He already represents both of you, both sides of this conflict. He is both of
Yeah.
your king. But
Yeah.
because
Exactly. No,
but
that's right.
because it was Parliament, they can now it now raises that issue of, well, why aren't we part of Parliament?
Yeah. You see, and that's why even now I still look favorably upon the American Revolution, the colonies deciding to, separate from the British and, forge their own path through history because of, well, exactly that.